Welcome, everyone. My name is David Sandu. I'm a financial advisor, and I'm really excited to talk about today's topic, which is biblical stewardship, managing God's money for His glory. And it really it comes out of a scripture that I'm really passionate about, and I share with as many people as I can. It comes from 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19, and it says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up a treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life." So that's a kind of a foundational scripture for me personally, but then also in my business. I think about this a lot, and especially with my clients. So really excited that y'all are here today, and we'll go and get into it. So again, this is about a biblical stewardship, but I just want to make sure that you're aware that anything we discuss or talk about is meant to be general information and educational in nature, and it's not meant to be specific tax, financial, or legal advice. And so appreciate you being mindful of that. All right. So are you in the right place? Well, this is the right training for you if you believe that God owns it all. If you are a Christian and you want to honor the Lord with all of your wealth, if you have money left over at the end of the month and you want to make better financial decisions with it, maybe you've started to make more money, but it hasn't really changed your financial situation. Or maybe you're already consistently saving, but you want to learn how to be a better steward of God's resources. And so if that sounds like you, then you are in the right place. And so that's a little bit about you. A little bit about me. Well, I was a former rocket scientist. I worked at companies like Raytheon and SpaceX and Lockheed. I'm creator of the faith-driven financial planning system that allowed my wife and I to pay off a little over $100,000 in college student loan debt, save up an emergency fund of 1 year, become millionaires by the time I turned 33, give over $150,000 in charitable donations over the past years, and then pay cash for the last 3 houses we've owned. So I'm not just saying something that I don't believe in. I really believe in the Word of God and its ability to enhance and improve our lives financially. And I've also taught and advised hundreds of families to accomplish these similar types of goals fast. So I'm excited to share a little bit about my background. Excuse me. So my story. So where does my story start? Well, it really starts with my dad in 2014. 2014 was a big year for me. I lost my father that year, and one of the stories that always sticks out to me is a story that I share with most people. But I asked my dad one day, I said, "Dad, do you have any investments or retirement accounts?" And he jokingly said, and to preface the story, I'm one of 5 kids. And he jokingly said, "Yeah, David, I have 5 retirement accounts and investment accounts that I've been putting money into over the years." And the punchline is we were his investments. We were his retirement accounts. Unfortunately, he passed away, but that's what he really believed. He believed in investing in his kids and investing not only the values and the valuables into his kids. So it was more about not only the possessions and the short-term aspects of this life, but also with living with eternity in mind. And so he really helped us develop strong outlooks for eternity and living for eternity. And so after my father passed away, I really had to walk my mom through a lot of tough financial planning questions, and that really put a burden on me. I really enjoyed those conversations with my mom, not because my father passed, but just because I enjoy talking about money and helping people with money. And after that, it put a spark in me, and I really wanted to help other people develop a healthy relationship with money, but then also teach them how to be good with money. And so at the time I was working at SpaceX actually, and I wanted to just help people. So I started researching how can I help other people. And so I found Financial Peace University. It was actually a program that I took many years ago back in college, and I started teaching Financial Peace University at my local church and then other churches around the area. And so that's how I really got started in helping people become better with their money. But the other thing that really made an impact for me was also in 2014. I became aware of a story that you might all be familiar with. It was a story about Hobby Lobby. And in 2014, Hobby Lobby went to the Supreme Court because the administration at the time was mandating that all employers provide abortion care to their employees. Well, Hobby Lobby, being owned by a company, owners that were Christian, they didn't want to provide that abortion care to their employees. And in a huge win for religious freedom, Hobby Lobby won the case. But another thing that came out of that story, it was actually in the news a couple days after the story broke in 2014. But it was all over the news. It says Hobby Lobby invested in companies that produce abortion drugs, and I had to stop and think to myself, what are they talking about? How does Hobby Lobby invest in companies that produce abortion drugs? And what they really were talking about was in Hobby Lobby's 401k, they were invested in companies that were producing abortion pills and abortifacients. And that really started to, I started to wonder, like, what does that mean for us as Christians? And how can we take stewardship into that level of investing? And I started thinking, like, does God care? Does God care how we invest our money? Should we care, right? Should I care how I invest the money that he's given to me? And so that led me down this path to understand what I do today, which is called biblically responsible investing. But it really helped me to understand what are the things that I'm invested in the market. And so that might be things like abortion or pornography or things that are causing people addiction. And it really put it started convincing me that maybe this matters. And I always tell people it took me about 6 months to become convinced that this matters to God, and that he cares, and that we should care where our investments are going. And then it took me another 6 months to become convicted about it, and really, to do something about it. So I think, everybody has to take that ownership of themselves and really understand what is stewardship. What does biblical stewardship really mean? And so after studying, God's word to understand true biblical stewardship, understanding what was out there in the world today in terms of investing, and interviewing other people that were further along in their biblical journey and biblical stewardship journey than me, I really understood and I wanted to make an impact in my own personal investments. So I started looking at my own investments, and I started to understand what I was invested in, but then also how I could help other people. And so that's what really led me to, to find the team that I'm at today, which is a group of Christian financial advisors at Wise Wealth, which is the firm I'm at now, to really understand and implement biblical stewardship into financial plans. And how does it really work when you take a stewardship perspective into your financial planning? And I was talking about biblically responsible investing so much that my story got picked up with Yahoo Finance, and I was able to share my story of biblically responsible investing and finding a Christian financial advisor, someone that really is in your corner and understands your biblical values. And so I was able to get quoted in there and published in Yahoo Finance. This was a couple years back, and they actually republished it last year. So really exciting there. I'll drop a link after the chat so you can see it if you'd like to read more about it. But that's what really led me down to becoming a financial advisor and just to really understand biblical stewardship. And that's what we're talking about today. How can we manage God's money for his glory? And really going back to 1 Timothy 6:17-19, really understanding how can we implement biblical stewardship, not only in our savings, in the way we manage debt, the way we manage our investing, but in every aspect of our financial life. And there are a lot of different aspects of our financial life. And so when we take a step back, one of the people that I was able to interview and just talk to was Ron Blue, and he's been around a long time in the financial services industry, and I love his definition of stewardship. And I'm just going to quote it here. I have it up on the screen, and it says, "A biblical worldview begins and ends with the stewardship mentality. Biblical stewardship can be defined as the use of God-given gifts and resources, your time, talent, influence, relationships, treasures, for the accomplishment of God-given goals and objectives." And again, that's by Ron Blue. He has a ton of very good resources and books that are out there. I would encourage everyone to read. But I think that's such a good and succinct definition of biblical stewardship: the use of God-given gifts and resources for the accomplishment of God-given goals and objectives. And as we talk more about stewardship, just keep that in the back of your mind. That's such a good definition, and I use this all the time when I talk to people. But stewardship is only one aspect of what I call the 5 money beliefs. And we're not going to get into all the money beliefs today, but because stewardship is what we're talking about. But I really think there's 5 money beliefs that everyone has to manage in their heart. And we're going to get to the practical stuff here shortly, but there's 5 money beliefs. The first one is stewardship. So do I believe that God owns it all, or do I believe that I own it all? Contentment. Do I believe that what I have right now is enough? And that leads to the question, how much is enough? Faith. Do I believe that I can demonstrate my faith by the way I manage my finances? Wisdom. Do I believe that God's wisdom on finances is available and true to my life? And then generosity. Do I believe that it's more blessed to give than it is to receive? So those are the 5 money beliefs I think that can really shape a person's heart on biblical stewardship and really managing God's money for his glory. So that leads us to the 12 steps, the 12 practical steps that we can all take in our personal life. And I call this the faith-driven financial roadmap. And a lot of the 2 biggest questions I get all the time are, where do I start financially? And then what is the next step I take? And so I designed this financial roadmap based on biblical principles that I glean from the Bible, but then also people's questions. And a lot of times people's questions can tell a lot about what they're struggling with, but then also kind of the state of mind that they're in. And so I developed this faith-driven financial roadmap to help people understand where they are and then what is the next step they need to take financially in order to increase. And a lot of times people are looking for all of the things they should be doing. And I always tell people this faith-driven financial roadmap is the 20% of actions that's going to lead to 80% of the results. So yes, there's a lot of noise and a lot of things that you could be doing. But if you just focus on these top 20% of actions, I think that'll really push you further into helping you accomplish your faith-driven and God-given financial goals. So the first one is to start giving. I think that generosity breaks the power of money over our lives. And Jesus talked so much about giving, and especially when he talked about that we cannot serve both God and mammon. We will either love one and hate the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. So I think when we have a heart of generosity and we're not giving under compulsion or ambition, that we have really a heart of gratitude towards God, but then also we live with an open hand towards others. And so that's the first step. If you're not giving, I would encourage you to start giving, whether that is to your local church, or if it's on top of that, and maybe in offerings to other people or other ministries, just to start giving somewhere. Maybe it's your time, maybe it's your talent, or maybe it's your treasure. Whatever, in any of those 3 areas, I think that one of the biggest aspects of developing a biblical stewardship heart is to start giving. So that's the first step in the faith-driven financial roadmap. The second step, and again, what I'm telling you is what I see people missing it most on, that are the simplest things to accomplish. The second step here is to protect your family from financial emergencies. And there's 3 big D's that I talk about: death, disability, and deductibles. So death, obviously death is a huge issue that a lot of people are not insured for. And so when people pass away, a lot of times spouses and families are not capable of taking care of their family because there was no life insurance in place. So I think it's important, especially as stewards of God's resources, and to take care of our family, that we have something in place for them, whether it's our own assets or if it's transferring that risk to an insurance company. The second aspect is disabilities. So a lot of times disabilities can have maybe even a more damaging effect than death. And I'll explain why here. Because if someone were to pass away, that not only, well, their income is not coming in, but also they don't need any income. But if you're disabled, not only can you not work, but you're not providing income, and you're also could potentially be a burden to your family. So a disability insurance can be another big issue that a lot of people are not appreciating. And a lot of times, this might be provided by your employer, but if you're self-employed, obviously it's important to have some other type of policy outside of that. And then the third D, to protect your family from financial emergencies, is high deductibles. A lot of times people talk about 3 to 6 months of expenses, or a X number of months. But I always say, if whatever your highest deductible is, whether that's your house or your car or medical, have that highest deductible amount just set away in a savings account, so that if something were to happen, you don't have a financial emergency and a medical or house or car emergency as well. So that's step 2 of the faith-driven financial roadmap. Step 3 is to maximize employer benefits. And the reason why I put this here as number 3 is because so many people I see are missing out on taking advantage of free money that maybe their employer offers. And they might be so focused on investing or paying off debt or some other types of savings that they're not really focusing on this free money that is existing here. And so the first aspect of this is the Roth 401k. Now, the 401k has been very popular over the years for people to put money away, but the Roth 401k is a newer complement to the 401k, which is also an employer-sponsored plan. But there's some really big benefits to the Roth 401k that are very different from the Roth IRA, which is an individual retirement account. The first one is that there's no income limitation. So if I make 50,000 or 500,000, because the Roth 401k is employer sponsored, it doesn't matter what my income is, which is huge. The other different aspect between the Roth 401k and the Roth IRA is the amount you can contribute to a Roth 401k is about 3 times more. It's actually over 3 times more the amount that you can contribute to a Roth IRA. So the limits are a lot higher. The second aspect of employer benefits that I see people missing out on is a health savings account. When you contribute to a health savings account is a triple tax advantaged account. And so a lot of people are missing this triple tax advantage opportunity, or they might be misusing it. And the biggest way I see people misusing it is potentially to put money in and then not letting it invest, because actually the health savings account, the money that's in there, you can actually invest it into the market. And so after 10 or 20 or 30 years, potentially that could be a hefty amount of money. And when the money comes out for medical expenses, then it's tax-free. So it's a huge triple tax advantaged account that I see a lot of people missing out or not making the most of it. And then finally, the third section here is the employer match. And the employer match is an awesome opportunity. They might match your investing. So if you make a contribution to your 401k, they might match it. The other aspect, though, that I see people missing is they also might match your generosity. So a lot of employers will, if you put, let's just say, $1,000 towards a 501c3 nonprofit, the employer might match a part of that donation. So check your employer-sponsored benefits and see if that's an option for you. So that's the third step in the faith-driven financial roadmap. The fourth step is to pay off high-interest debt. If you are familiar with Dave Ramsey and his methodology of teaching, then you probably are familiar with the debt snowball, which I'm also a huge fan of. The debt snowball, there's 2 different ways that are popular to pay off debt. The first one is the debt snowball method. The debt snowball method says to list your debts smallest to largest and then pay off the debts in that order, smallest to largest. And the reason behind that is because, obviously we are all very behavioral. And so when we see a quick win, when we pay off that smallest debt, it gives us momentum to keep paying off those larger and larger debts. The debt avalanche method is kind of the opposite. It's list your highest debt amount first and then pay off that amount first, and then, list your highest interest rate first. So the highest, whatever loan amount has the highest interest rate, you pay off that first, and then you subsequently pay down the ones with the lower interest rate at the end. I always say the best debt payment plan is the one that you will stick to. So behaviorally, a lot of people like the debt snowball plan because you get those quick wins in the beginning, and then as you progress, you feel better about the kind of the snowball that builds up. Same thing with the debt avalanche. If that feels more comfortable for you, whichever one you can stick to and really have that tenacity to pay off that debt, that works for me. So that's the fourth step in the faith-driven financial roadmap. The fifth step is to build up your cash reserve. So I already talked about in step 2 the high deductible amount that you should have. Now, this is a little bit different. I'm talking now about building up your cash reserves. This would be if you were to lose your job. So this would be 3 to 6 months of expenses and high yield in a high yield savings account. So this would be if you were to lose your job, or if something were to happen and maybe your spouse lost their job, and you would have that extra savings set aside that you can actually contribute to your income or supplement your income. And a lot of people, they ask, should it be 3 months or should it be 6 months? And I always say it depends on your specific job. If you are in a job that ebbs and flows and you know that layoffs are impending, then I would go probably more towards maybe 10 months. So 3 to 6 months is just a kind of a rule of thumb. It really just depends on your specific situation. If you are employed and your spouse is employed, and if you can live off one income, there's a lot of different factors in there. So it's just kind of a rule of thumb. You can take it for what it is and apply it to your own family. So that's the fifth step. And I always recommend, especially in the interest rate environment that we're in, to use a high yield savings account, because that is another way that you can just accrue some basic interest there. So that's the fifth step. The sixth step in the faith-driven financial roadmap is to evaluate your taxes. Again, so many people I see missing out here on their tax situation. And in the scripture I'm referencing here, Matthew 22, this is a scripture where Jesus says, pay to Caesar what is Caesar's and pay to God what is God's. And I always tell people, no one says that you have to give Caesar or Uncle Sam a tip. And so a lot of people are missing out on their taxes because they're not necessarily sure which retirement account they should be contributing to, because they don't have the right education and accountability. But there's 3 basic types of tax accounts. There's a tax-free account, a tax-deferred account, and then a taxable account. And I'll break down here each one. The tax-free account, those are like the Roths. So you have Roth 401k, Roth IRA, those types of accounts. That's tax-free in retirement. So when you get to retirement, that money will come back to you tax-free. You do have to pay taxes on that money now, but in retirement, I'm referring to that money will come back to you tax-free. The second way is through an HSA. Now, this money is tax deductible now and tax-free later. So this is a triple tax advantage account because the money can grow tax-free as well. So for the tax-free options, you have the Roth and you have the HSA. The other tax-free, it's not an investment account, it's an insurance product, but life insurance. Life insurance, when someone passes away, comes to you income tax-free. And now tax deferred have been harped on many years because of the tax deferral opportunity. When you make a contribution to your traditional 401k, you don't pay any taxes on that contribution, but that will be deferred, or you're kicking that tax can down the road. And so just know that when you get to retirement, you will have to pay taxes on that money. So it really depends on the type of tax environment that we'll be in when you get to retirement. So we know the tax environment that we're in now. We're under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act legislation, and that provision, the tax rates, are going back up in 2026. We know that now. So if you're going to retire in the next few years, there are some things you could be doing. If you have a long time horizon, then you have to decide, do you think you'll be in a higher tax bracket in retirement? And do you think tax rates are going up or down in the future? So I have my own opinions about tax rates, but we're not going to get into that. And then the third aspect here is taxable accounts. So that's your traditional brokerage accounts. You just go to any traditional brokerage company and you open up a taxable brokerage account. There's no special tax treatment there, except for long-term capital gains. But those are generally the three types of tax accounts. So tax-free, tax-deferred, and taxable accounts. They're going to be different for everybody, and everybody needs to really understand what situation they're in from a tax perspective to be more tax efficient, not only now, but also when you get to that retirement age. So that's the sixth step. The seventh step is to align your investments. And this is one I'm so passionate about because the three aspects I tell people to align their investments with are align your investments with your values. And what I'm talking about here specifically is if you're a Christian and you have biblical values, there are very simple, easy ways to screen biblical principles from investment accounts. And so this is something that I went through when I heard that story of Hobby Lobby on the radio. This is something that I went through in my personal portfolio. I wanted to understand, how can I invest how can I invest the money that's in my retirement accounts to God's glory, and to not be involved in companies that didn't align with my values. And so that's the first step. Align your investments with your values. And that can be done through biblically responsible investing, something I'm very passionate about. If you have more questions about that, I would love to talk to you about that. The second aspect is time horizon. Align your investments with your time horizon. A lot of people, wake up in 10, 15, 20 years and realize that that they're not invested according to their time horizon, because maybe they took a risk tolerance questionnaire and they answered a few questions, and that put them in a specific asset allocation. But a lot of people are not really understanding how to invest because they don't understand their time horizon. I always generally tell people, if you have more than a 5-ish year time horizon, then that might be appropriate to be in the market. And if you don't, then you might not consider the market as a suitable way to invest. And then finally, asset allocation. A lot of people, again, are not allocated correctly from an asset allocation perspective because they took maybe a questionnaire or they read something online, and they are not properly allocated in their investment accounts. So those are the three different ways from an investment perspective to align yourself. And if you have questions about biblically responsible investing, I'm just going to drop a link to my Calendly. I would love to talk more about biblically responsible investing, or any specific question that you have about investing, or anything really related to the faith-driven financial roadmap. So that's step 7 of the faith-driven financial roadmap. Step 8 is to protect your estate. Now, there's a lot of different aspects of protecting your estate, and we're not going to get into all of it, but there are some basic things that everyone can do. And a couple of those are the documents. So the documents that you can fill out and provide for healthcare directives or power of attorney, or authorizations for medical power of attorneys, or healthcare power of attorneys, or financial power of attorneys, whatever that is for your specific situation. It's important to have those documents in place and readily available if something were to happen to you, and maybe it was an accident and unplanned. The second thing is to understand your estate plan. A lot of times people might go through the probate process unnecessarily because they could have had a will or a trust in place to bypass the probate process. And so it's really important to understand, what are the assets that I have? How will they pass when I pass away to my heirs? And are there things that I can do to avoid the probate process? And then the last aspect is beneficiary designations. This is especially important if you have recently been married or divorced or had kids, really any big life changes in your life. It's important to have those beneficiary designations reviewed, and then make sure that you keep them updated every so often. So those are some of the key aspects of protecting your estate. That's step 8. The step 9 here is to save for your faith-driven financial goals. And I always say, people always ask me, well, what are my faith-driven financial goals? I always say, you need to ask God about that, not me. So the first step here is to pray. Pray and ask God, what are the goals that he has put on your heart? It might be missions, it might be giving, it might be starting a company. There are a lot of different goals. It might be paying off your house. This is really the time to get alone and time with God to understand what are the goals that he wants you to accomplish. Then you name the goal, you specify the amount that it's going to take, and then you set a date on it. I think this is really important, that you set a date and you write all these things down. A lot of times people that accomplish their goals, you can go back in the years and see that they have actually written down their goal. They are being specific about it, and they've set a date. So whatever the goal is that God's put on your heart, name it, specify the amount, and then set a date for it, so you can make those smaller goals a reality. So that's step 9 of the faith-driven financial roadmap. Step 10 is to optimize your plan. So when I was working on rockets at SpaceX, we had something called course correction. So if the rocket took off on a trajectory and then it slightly, got veered off because of winds or turbulence or whatever, we had to make course corrections so that the rocket could get back on path. And a lot of times I see people that are kind of wandering through life. Maybe they've gotten married or they have kids, and they kind of just let their investments and their money and their taxes and all that kind of just wander. And so it's really important to course correct, especially as you get closer to that age when you might want to stop working or make work optional. And so there's a lot of different areas to optimize your plan. But here are some of the big aspects I see people missing it out on. The first one is tax planning. So it might be doing Roth conversions or tax loss harvesting, but there are a number of ways to really get into your specific financial plan and make those course corrections from a tax planning perspective. The second one is investment optimization. For some people, their asset allocation might have gotten veered off, or might be unintentionally off course. And so it's important to relook at those investments and make sure that you're on track to meet your goals. And then from an estate planning perspective, like I mentioned, some people get married and divorced or have kids, or there's changes in their family. And so it's important to review those documents regularly. And then the last aspect here I'll mention is generosity. A lot of people, especially Christians, are wanting to be generous with their finances. And there are a good number of ways to be generous from a financial planning perspective and to be tax efficient. And one of those ways is using a donor advised fund. And so if you don't know what a donor advised fund is, that's fine, but we can talk more about it later. The donor advised fund is just a great way to give to charities, get a tax benefit in the current year, and in perpetuity, you can potentially give those funds out over years. It's also a great way to have conversations with your kids, because you can leave the donor advised fund as a beneficiary to someone and have those same conversations with them, and actually have that conversation of, hey, where do you want to give to this year? So it's a great way to establish a legacy and also a giving fund. So that's step 10. Step 11 is to redefine retirement. There is so much noise when it comes to retirement planning. And I'm actually teaching a class in 2 weeks called Rethinking Retirement, because there are a lot of missteps that people make. But a lot of things happen when you hit 50. There's catch-up contributions. You might start thinking about long-term care. You might start thinking about Medicare, Social Security planning, tax-efficient distribution planning, pensions, investments, annuities, all those different types of products and planning and taxes and all that. So it's important that you redefine retirement to what God is asking you to do. So I always say it's important that you don't retire from something, that you retire to something. And so whatever that is that you've prayed about and you feel like God is calling you to do, retire to that. so that you have some mission and purpose. But from the financial aspect, it's also important that you don't make decisions outside the context of a full financial plan. That's the biggest misstep I see. People will ask me about Social Security without taking into account the tax perspective, or they'll ask me about Roth conversions without taking into account Medicare premium surcharges, or they'll ask me about RMDs without taking into account long-term care planning. So there's a lot of different aspects of financial planning and retirement planning that goes into really redefining retirement. But it's important that you think about this not just from a 1, 2, or 3 year perspective, that you think about it from a 20 or 30 year perspective. So that's what I mean when I talk about redefining retirement. And then finally, step 12 is to find that wise counsel. There is so much, like I mentioned, there is so much noise and other people that are talking in our ears, and it's important that we refocus and we get the godly counsel in our life that can speak biblical stewardship and biblical wisdom into our life. So that might be a faith-driven financial advisor, that might be a forward-looking accountant, insurance professionals, estate planning attorneys, Medicare specialists, Social Security planners, whoever that is, and whatever you need that's in that time of life. I would say, don't be arrogant. Ask for help when you need help. And so there's a lot of different aspects of, especially retirement planning, when you get to that age of trying to make work optional. And so ask for help. There are a lot of people that will help you. And so with that is the full 12-step faith-driven financial roadmap. So if you have questions about any of that, I would love to just get some time, and you can get some time on my calendar. I've dropped a link to my Calendly in the chat, and if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed or excited and you want to get more of your questions answered, I would encourage you to book a call. What you'll get on this call is quite a lot of things, but we'll go over your current financial situation. We'll discuss your values, your biblical values, how you view money. We talked about those 5 money beliefs. And then finally, where do you want to be financially? We'll look at the problems you're facing financially and then discuss what you need to do specifically to overcome them. And then finally, we'll see if it makes sense for you to implement a faith-driven financial plan. So again, I've put a link to my Calendly in the chat box. You're welcome to use that link, schedule a time directly on my calendar. But who should book a call? Well, you should book a call, and if any of these sound like you, then this is perfect for you. If you want to become a more faithful manager of the resources God has given you, you want to align your biblical values with your investments. You have financial goals, but you don't feel like you have clear financial systems or maybe a roadmap and the tools to get you there. Maybe you're a DIYer, a do-it-yourselfer, and you just want to make sure you're not missing something. Maybe you want to develop a legacy to leave values and the valuables to the next generation. Maybe you want to model biblical stewardship to your family and leave a biblical legacy. Or maybe you feel like you have several goals, but you don't know which one to focus on first. Maybe you're looking for structure and confidence with your finances, or maybe you could feel like you could use some guidance and direction. So if that sounds like you, again, I would encourage you to book a call. A couple of the frequently asked questions that I get a lot is, what if I want to work with you, but I don't have any investments to manage, or all my investments are in my 401k? Don't worry, we have plenty of options to work with us. The main point here is that we want to get the biblical financial wisdom and advice to you. Second one, what if I already have a financial advisor or a CPA or a financial professional? I say that's fantastic. They might have gotten you to a place where you are now, but they may not be able to get you into the finish line. And so if you have more questions, or maybe the reason why you're on this call is because you have more questions that you need answers to, I always say it's always great to get a second opinion. Third question I get a lot is, what if now is not the right time? And I always tell people, now is always the best time. People always say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Same thing with our finances. Don't wake up in a year or 5 or 10 years and regret that you didn't have a call with someone who could have course corrected you on the right path. And then the final question I get is, can I implement a faith-driven financial plan on my own? And I always say, yes, of course. You can research, you can spend the thousands of hours studying, but it's a lot easier when you have someone to guide you along that journey and along that path. So again, if that sounds like you, book a call. We'll go over your current financial situation. We'll discuss your values, your money, where you want to be financially. We'll look at any problems that you're facing financially and discuss what you need to do specifically to overcome them. I'm betting that one of those 12 steps stood out to you, so I want to hear what that is. And then finally, we'll see if it makes sense for you to implement a faith-driven financial roadmap. So again, I'll put a link to my calendar in the chat box. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a real pleasure to share my story, my heart, the reason why I got into financial services, and also what I've learned about biblical stewardship and managing God's money for his glory. So with that, I'll say thank you so much, and I hope you have an amazing day.